Welcome to the Sisters-in-Laws podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women that replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women in the United States, according to the CDC and NIH. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, or stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, and hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. Freeman, and you'll hear me interview other sisters-in-laws from around the world who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Storytelling is powerful. Storytelling is activism. Storytelling is healing. Now let's get started. Hello, welcome to the podcast. I would love you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yes, my name is Shayla Brown, and I'm the founder and creator of Genesis Birthing and Living. It's a doula agency, but it's also a storytelling platform for Black women to help us birth without trauma or shame, using our stories to heal from trauma and shame, and using storytelling as a form of data.
Absolutely. I love that. I would love for you to just take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your birth story.
Yeah, so I'm expecting my 8th baby. So I have quite a few birth stories. But for the purposes of this podcast, I'll just kind of like talk about my lost stories. I've been pregnant with 10 babies, and this is my 8th, hopefully, live birth. So the first, I guess, story of loss, and it's taken me a while, like I said in my write-up, to even identify myself with stories of loss. I never thought about it like that for a long time because my miscarriage happened so early, at 4 weeks, and I never got a proper formal confirmation from any medical provider that I'd had a miscarriage. It was actually from the story of a friend of mine that helped me to put the pieces together to understand what happened. So I was trying to get pregnant. This is before I had any of my children. And I was trying to get pregnant and having trouble. And then just one night I started cramping really bad. And I started to bleed and pass all this tissue. And it wasn't like any cycle that I'd ever had, because I never had like back cramps. I had pretty bad cycles for a while. I was cleansing my body to just to get healthier so that I could maybe have babies or just heal a lot of issues I was having, feminine issues. And I was having this recurring toothache. I was trying to heal that too. So, but I had never felt anything like this, like just like this wraparound kind of like, now I know it was contractions, but I had never felt that before. And it was just constant. It wasn't like a pulsating pain that you kind of associate with menstrual pain. It was just a constant, felt like gnawing or tearing, around the circumference of my abdominal area and my lower back. And so that whole night I kind of just went through that, and I didn't know what that was. And the next day I was still bleeding, even though that had kind of subsided. And like I said, I was passing so much tissue. I was like, this doesn't feel like a cycle. I don't know what this is, but this just seems abnormal. But I went to work anyway. But like halfway through the day, I was just like, I think maybe I should go get checked out or something, because this is all still happening. And I'm still just too uncertain about what's going on. And so I talked to my supervisor, and I went to the clinic where I was. I was in Mount Bayou, Mississippi at the time. It's a historically Black town. I don't know. Some people may have heard of it. And ironically, Mount Bayou is historically known for building the nation's first HMO, health, medical, whatever it is, but at the Saborian Hospital. but that's not there anymore. And so that's been replaced by, I think at the time it was the Delta Health Clinic. So I went there and there was a nurse midwife. That was a very confusing, troubling experience because when I got there, she just, I felt like she was attacking me and I really couldn't understand why. Like so I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm pregnant. Like, maybe I'm finally pregnant and maybe this has something to do with that. And so I asked her when she sat down and we sat in her office and she's like, no, you're not pregnant. But I think you've been, and she was like, we found some tissue in your urine and some blood in your urine. And I think you've been eating a lot of junk food and cookies and cakes and crackers and stuff. That was exactly my reaction. I was like, excuse me? Because again, like I said, I'm trying to, start cleansing and I'm switching over to veganism. And regardless, what kind of response is that, So I was like, no. And I'm still wondering, okay, but what is wrong with me? You're talking about my possible personal habits. What is wrong with me though? So she said, you're not pregnant. And then she just started talking about what she assumed I was doing in my life. And my husband was sitting right there. And she was like, who is this right here? Is this your friend or something? And I was like, this is my husband. And she's like, oh, well. And I don't remember anything else she said. What I do know is I did not get no diagnosis. I don't know. I left there bruised pretty much. Still hurt that I wasn't pregnant. Still confused about what was going on. And then just, I guess, hurt and upset and confused about why it had gone like that. Like why she was talking to me like that. And so after that, I went home and I Googled my symptoms because I'm a Googler, that's what I do. So I went to Google some things and I thought about, like I said, I thought back to this story that my friend had told me when we were in college. She had become pregnant unwantedly. And so I was going to go with her to get an abortion. But between her making that decision and us going, she told me about this night when she had all this cramping and all this pain and bleeding. And then when we went to the abortion clinic, they told her she had a miscarriage and that she didn't have a baby in there. So that's about how I was able to, that plus the Google search that I did was how I was able to put together like, oh, I think you just had a miscarriage. And that was devastating, to be quite honest. Not only was I not pregnant, I was pregnant, and then I lost, this baby, and then I had to figure that out, like on my own, without any validation or like any confirmation of what had happened. I just kind of had to push past what was going on with me to find out what was going on with me. And if it wasn't for that story that I had with that friend, I'm not sure I ever would have actually figured it out, because it can be hard to Google things. You'll get all kinds of, of answers to what could be wrong with you. And so the bleeding just kept going on for a couple of days. And like I said, I kept passing tissue, and that was just hard, like to know that was what was happening. And nobody, because my husband had been sitting there when the nurse midwife said that. So he was not experiencing what I was experiencing. So he had kind of taken what she said too. He was like, I don't understand, like, why are you sad? What's going on? And I'm trying to explain to him, no, this is what actually happened. And then it's an intangible thing for anybody else who's not experiencing it. So it's not like we had a baby in our hands and then it was gone. All I had was the hope of this baby and the intention for this baby and the desire for it. And all of that was dying as well, which is what made it very hard. And hard to kind of try experience with other people because they couldn't see it or feel it the way that I was feeling it. So finally, I think I got through to my husband, I just wasn't getting over it that soon. And I just think that kind of translated after a while. And I finally feel like I had at least him as support in what I was feeling. But nobody else, the other women around me were the elder women were very cold. You know, they were very, well, you could try again. Well, maybe it's not God's will. One nurse, when I went back to the clinic, she was like, "Isn't that good that you're not pregnant?" And I'm like, "No, because I would like to be." But there was just this perception that babies were a hassle and a hardship, and people were kind of happy that I wasn't. They were happy for me that I wasn't pregnant, which was very, very difficult to navigate. And like I said, I also just think I never heard anybody's miscarriage story. I still don't know to this day if my mom's ever had a miscarriage, if my aunts have ever had a miscarriage, if any woman that I know has ever had a miscarriage. I don't know. Nobody shared that story with me. So it was a reeling experience, I guess. I was just really, unfortunately, thrown into an evaluation of a culture that I come from. And it was very much a culture of this idea that toxic positivity, I think is what it's called now, where if something doesn't happen, then maybe it's God's will that it didn't happen. And well, look at the bright side. Maybe y'all weren't ready to have a baby. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe, all of these things, all these maybes to try to justify why I'm experiencing this pain without acknowledging the pain. And then, like I said, it was almost like no woman had ever gone through this, experienced it, heard of it, ever been affected by it. Like nobody could understand why I might be sad. It was just really sobering, I guess. And I was distraught at the same time. I don't know. So I think after that, with the way everybody was acting, and I felt like I was a lot in defense mode. And I don't really think I had space to grieve like I needed to, or tools to grieve, or even just the validation that I should be grieving. Because it's like, had I even lost anything? What had I lost? And, and why did this happen? And then I thought, well, maybe this happened because I'm, unhealthy, and I just need to get on top of my health, And so I started doing all of these things. And while I did need to focus more on my health, I just think the place that I was doing it from was this place of trying to control my own narrative and trying to push past being hurt, like really quickly, because nobody around me really understood it. And it didn't seem like it made sense. So I started to feel like it didn't make sense for me to be stuck here that long either. Like, well, you just got to keep moving, try again. And then on top of that, I was reading Medical Apartheid. There's a book just about all of these abuses that Black people have suffered throughout the course of history in this country. And I was reading Physician Heal Thyself by Queen Afua, and African Holistic Health by Dr. Africa, and Sacred Woman by Queen Afua. And so I was just getting to the place where I just was getting really paranoid about, and then there was, just the Black maternal health crisis that was coming to the forefront at the time, because this was 2015. So there's just more conversation about it starting to happen, or this is 2013, 2014, something like that. So the conversation was kind of starting to pick up. Doulas was starting to become a thing. Midwives were resurfacing, but it still was fairly new. So I was just all around paranoid. And then on top of it, the way that woman acted, I just like, I'm scared. I don't want any of these people touching me, looking at me. I would just figure it out on my own. So I didn't believe anything. I said, I'm just gonna go about this, healing myself and getting pregnant on my own. So after I started doing things, and I don't even know at which point things shifted, but I just know I got to a point where I just told myself I was pregnant, and the negative pregnancy test didn't mean anything. I just wanted it so bad, and I just didn't know how to get it. And so, and I didn't know who to trust, what to believe. So I just said, I'm just gonna believe me, and I'm gonna believe my own desires and my own thoughts, processes, and I'm gonna believe in my own work. And so I was having all these negative pregnancy tests, but I was ignoring them. After a while, I finally did go back to that same clinic to get a ultrasound, and nothing was in there, but the doctor did show me, like, you have a couple of cysts, on your ovaries and some polyps, but I just was like, whatever, I don't believe you either. I don't trust y'all, you know what I'm saying? But looking back, that was some good information to have, I guess. I mean, he also didn't like sit down and was like, here's the treatment plan and this is your diagnosis. And, that never happened. So I just went about my life. And then finally, I think my mother-in-law threw me like a baby shower, and I started to experience what they call pseudocyesis, or what's called pseudocyesis, or a phantom pregnancy, where, you can kind of talk yourself into something, and then your mind can like manifest things. Your body will manifest what your mind believes. And so I started to kind of present as pregnant a little bit. But my uterus never changed or anything, and there was no baby in there. And eventually I had to get to the place where I believed that. Like I said, I had a baby shower at this point. I had told people it was something to try to walk back from after doing all of that. But looking back on it, I realized that it was a trauma response to how I had been treated and how I had been invalidated. And I realized that I can't ignore my feelings. I don't know if anybody can when something happens, because that stuff is going to manifest some kind of way. Like, it has to go somewhere. And if it's not properly handled, then it's just gonna, like I said, it's gonna manifest itself in some kind of way. It's gonna make me feel like I can control, that I can heal myself through controlling my situation, or I can just make the situation be what I want it to be. But maybe if I had taken the time to grieve like I deserve to, I don't know how that would have went differently, but that's how that went. So that was a whole nother thing, just walking backward from like, okay, you're not pregnant. You're just not. I know you want to be, you're not. And you're just going to have to sit at not pregnant for a minute. Maybe you can figure out what to do about that. Maybe you can't. But what you can't do is make something be that ain't. And maybe you need to just take some time and like figure out why you want this so bad. You know what I mean? What is all of this about? And like I said, partly it was a trauma response to like trying to control my situation, but I was also, now I think I wanted a family so bad because of so much dysfunction in my own family growing up. I felt like if I could just build my own, then I could fix some of that. And I think that's why I was, shooting for that so bad. I don't know. So that's that story. I did, about a year later, I was able to get pregnant. Like I said, I had been doing a lot of cleansing and mentally, spiritually, physically, all of that stuff. And I think I did have to clear a lot of that out before I could sustain a pregnancy, I guess. I don't know. And I had been on birth control for like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years before that. Some stuff is just like, it just takes time, So So there was all of that. And but I finally did maybe like a year later after that, though that whole incident, I did finally become pregnant. And that was the end of that part. But it wasn't until, gosh, oh, probably I'm trying to see which kid was I on. I don't know, but it might have been like a year or two ago. And so that was like 2014 or 2015, like from 2013 to 2015 is when all of that happened. And it probably wasn't until about 2018, 2019. It was 2019. That's what it was. I remember now. I was pregnant with, yeah, that I saw this midwife tell her lost story. And then I realized, like, oh, I think it was like October, for Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And I never, ever, ever, for all that time, put my story out there as part of a pregnancy loss or infant loss or anything like that until I read her story. And I was just like, I think I should be joining this conversation because I think it applies to me. And I think all of that affected me a lot. I mean, even though I had written about it, I only wrote about it in relation to the successful pregnancy I had finally made it to with my first baby. And I had wrote the story in a way like, oh, isn't God faithful, and look, I'm finally pregnant. And here's why it took me so long to share. But I had never thought about it like its own separate experience and its own separate story and that baby's own separate narrative, until reading that midwife's story that she shared on Facebook. And then again, stories are informing things for me. But so that was that. I'm sorry, do I need to let you interject it all before I move to the next one?
No, go ahead and move on to the next one. I'm curious as to, hearing that story and how that has led you to wanting to be a birth worker and really, because I think that all influences not only how you show up as in those birthing spaces, as the person who's actually going through the birth after you experience loss, but also shaping the experiences of others to make sure that they have trauma-free birth. So I would love for you to talk about that and how you incorporated that, especially as you navigated additional pregnancies and losses.
Okay, thank you for, I guess, putting that in context, because again, I never tied all of that together. And I did go into births with women as like this protector. And I would be arguing with providers and nurses, and like I would have to de-stress when I left births because I would just really, I understood what it felt like to be in this vulnerable position where you're supposed to be receiving care and being attacked. So that, I guess that did have a lot to do with how I showed up at births. So much so that I wasn't even, because initially as a doula, I thought I would be there to comfort women and I would be there to, rub their backs and help them manage pain. And I was not always able to do that because I was so busy defending their choices and defending their right to be informed about things that were being done to them. Walking in, nurses trying to deliver their babies and student nurse midwives just getting ready to insert probes, the external fetal monitors into women and not explaining to them like what is about to happen, or not even asking, not even getting consent, and just being that set of eyes and the outside voice that I didn't really have when I was navigating that experience with it. Because after that, with this nurse midwife lady that I was sitting down with, I had so many questions, and I was like, why didn't I ask this? Why didn't I ask that? Why didn't I say this? Why didn't I? Well, I couldn't think of all of that at the time because I was kind of reeling from the devastation of not being pregnant and not knowing what was going on with me. And so just trying to be a third more conscious person for women as I showed up for them. And realizing, because when I finally did go into my first birth, that lasted for 5 days. I was in labor for 5 days. And after I processed it, like after a couple of years, I realized like I was still holding on to so much from that experience of loss, from not having supportive community support me when I did get pregnant. They act sadder when I was pregnant than they did when I lost the baby. So just fighting for my joy that entire pregnancy is that I went into that labor sad, and I tried not to be. I wanted to be happy. I was as happy as I think I could have been, but I didn't. My mother wasn't there. None of my aunts were there. None of the village who had raised me was there. My father was not there. I was in my in-laws' house. I had lost my job because I was pregnant. My supervisor was acting crazy with me. And it was my first time. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I had trained as a doula and I knew all of that. And I think I had a good provider. I had a student, she's a student midwife. So I trusted her and everything, but she wasn't my, she was my provider. She wasn't my family, you know what I mean? And then it was like a snowstorm in the middle of Mississippi. Nobody could go anywhere. It was just a lot going on. And like I said, it lasted for 5 days because I think I was so, I just had all of these adrenaline pumping emotions that would not allow oxytocin to flow through. And so I wanted so bad I understood how trauma could just hold up your labor. And I feel like that's a part that's not talked about, or that's not respected enough when we approach the issues or the problems of labor or of failure to progress. I mean, that's a really popular one that gets thrown around a lot. And it's a really popular reason that providers use to justify like hasty interventions. But a lot of times, the only thing that's wrong with that mom is that she hasn't processed something, or that she doesn't feel safe. And so I just tried so hard to create an environment where she could feel safe, and where people would give her space to labor. Like you just need space, you know what I mean? And when people are pressuring you and rushing you and asking you questions and sticking forms in your face and being mean and short and, taking you out of, like I said, safety mode into fight or flight mode, or out of concentration mode into now I got to do and process and think, and I got to get all analytical, when birth kind of requires that you be in more of a whatever the opposite of mental is space, and hospital births can just work on your mental so much. And so I tried to navigate a lot of the mental stuff for women so that they could just have space to labor. And a lot of them were going through some of the same things. A lot of them had lost babies traumatically, way further along than I did. A lot of them had issues with their partner. A lot of them, I think I might have been at one labor that had the woman's mother there. They were there by themselves, and most of the time I was the only person there with them. So, and I know that like if I hadn't been there, things would have gone differently. Like, because people's energy shifts when they see that there's somebody there watching and protecting this person, especially when you say, I'm her doula. Well, they know what that is. It's like, oh, okay, well, you're here to watch us specifically for that. So I just really, 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 really wanted to focus so much on create an environment where women could just birth in peace, in some semblance of peace, outside of whatever they had already been through leading up to this point where they now have to give birth. And a lot of times, like I said, lacking personal support, and then navigating or not even getting to traumas that they didn't even realize they had. So we would talk a lot about that beforehand, kind of like, what are your feelings about your birth? How do you feel around it? Not just, well, what interventions do you want? What interventions don't you want? Well, what do you want to, you want a water birth? That's all really nice. But for Black women, I think maybe it's women in general, I don't know. But I think we also have to focus way more on how do you feel right now? How do you feel about this pregnancy? How do you feel about this labor? How do you feel going into this labor? What do you want to feel while you're there? What kind of environment? What smells do you want? What would make this a joyful process for you? Do you want certain decorations, certain people in the room, certain food? Like, how can you do this in joy? Like, because I think we deserve that. And so many times we get, these lackadaisical reactions when we say we're pregnant from people who are supposed to love us. Like, oh, well, oh, well, gosh, like, I don't know. It's tragic to some people for some reason. It just depends on, where you come from. But like I said, the culture that I realized I grew up in is like, oh, we don't like babies around here. And it is tragic when a woman becomes pregnant, because all we think about is everything she's losing in her life, becoming pregnant. But it's like, well, what if I want that though? Like, not like, what if I don't see it as losing a bunch of stuff? Or what if it can go differently? Or what if I, like, the idea of having a baby is joyful for me, like, but they just can't come there with you. And so, like I said, so many women were just there by themselves, or because the pregnancy didn't look the way maybe their family thought it should look, they weren't married to the person, or whatever, their mom was mad at them about something and she just wouldn't show up. So now you got to try to be happy about something that nobody around you is happy about. So I know like I said, a lot, but I just really wanted to create a space where women could, like I said, think, breathe, and contemplate a joyous experience, and not just one where we survive and then be happy with that because we had a healthy baby or whatever. Like, how can we own and enjoy this experience going into it while we're going through it, and then walk away from it and look back on it like, man, that was a really beautiful experience,
Yes, I love that. Love that. So I would love to hear your story of your next story of loss that you are going to go into around that 2019 timeframe.
So, well, 2019, I didn't lose that baby, but I read the lost. I was pregnant at the time, and I read a lost story that just kind of made me, put mine into context. But my next story is really way more recent. I'm actually expecting right now, which was a surprise. I'm always surprised, and I don't know why, because it's not like I'm using contraceptives or anything. But so this was in December, and I just started to have this past December, 2023, and I just started to I thought I was having some really bad gas. And I'm like, I'm really bloated, and but I was having all this pain in my side, and I'm like, I just been eating too much meat or whatever. I don't know, like I'm just super bloated, and like, but I got to the point where I kind of couldn't stand up almost. Like, I was standing up, but I was walking really slowly, but I still was just thinking, well, maybe it's just gas. Then I started bleeding, and I said, well, maybe this is my cycle, but this is really early for my cycle, so that was strange. But I just was like, I don't know. And I just thought, like I said, that maybe I was having an early cycle, and having some really bad gas indigestion. But then one day I looked at my stomach, and there was this bruise on it, or like around my belly button. And I'm like, what in the world is this? I hadn't been punched in my stomach or anything. So I'm like, what is this? And I showed my husband, like, have you noticed this? Because it seemed like it came out of nowhere. It wasn't there the day before, or I didn't notice it. And he was like, no, and we're both thinking, like, was this like internal bleeding or something? So like, I Googled it again, and it said it was something called Cullen sign. And it's an indicator of a couple different problems. It could be that you're having an ectopic pregnancy, that I think it was like some kind of like gallbladder issues or something like that. And I was like, well, I don't know that I'm pregnant. But I took a pregnancy test. And then it was like, yeah, I am pregnant. Like, I was like, okay. And then I thought, well, dang, is this an ectopic pregnancy? So I went to the hospital, or the ER. Or I tried to go to urgent care first, and they didn't have no openings. So then I went to the ER, but I was also breastfeeding because I just had a baby in August of last year. And I was thinking, like, it's just way too early to be pregnant again, because typically, if I'm breastfeeding, that gives me about 6 months to, to not worry about contraception. And so I was just kind of shocked that, like, why would I be pregnant so early? And like I said, I was breastfeeding too. So, but I got to the ER, but I hadn't been pumping because I usually just exclusively breastfeed. I don't go anywhere. I mean, there's nobody to keep them, so I didn't pump or anything like that. So I sitting in the ER, it was taking a while, and I'm like, oh, I need to hurry up and get back. I don't have enough milk for him or whatever. So I went back home, tried to pump some more, and I said, well, I'll just go back to the hospital tomorrow. And so I did. I went to urgent care again. She saw me and said, you should go to the ER. Advocate for yourself if they try to blow you off, which was a little alarming to hear from, but I mean, I knew what she meant. It was just like, dang, okay. So I got there, and that was the diagnosis. Like, well, they did a ultrasound, and they were like, yeah, your pregnancy test is come back positive, but we don't see a baby inside your uterus, but we do see free flow of fluid. It looks like you're internally bleeding. We're going to have to do surgery. And I'm like, oh, I've never had surgery in my life. I was not expecting that at all. Even though I knew that if this is what this is, that's the only thing they're going to be able to do. So I'd had an ectopic pregnancy that had ruptured, I guess. So they had to do emergency surgery because apparently I was bleeding internally, and I'm not even sure how long that was happening before I realized that that's what was happening. So I called my husband to tell him, I have him on FaceTime this whole time, and just we're learning all this together, and just trying to settle my mind for like, okay, I'm going into surgery, and try not to be too scared about that because nobody's here. He's with the other kids at home. We don't have any family here, and we don't really talk to them anymore anyway. So I'm like, and then again, man, a Black woman, and you're just like, is this gonna go okay? Are they gonna, but I tried to record everything. So I had my phone and I was recording all the interaction. And like I said, having my husband on FaceTime, I just kind of wanted to at least send a message that there's somebody looking for me, somebody cares about me. So y'all gonna have to bring your A game or whatever. That's the best I could think to do. Yeah, that happened. I was wheeled back, talked to the doctor, asked the questions I had to ask. And then they did the surgery. And what was comforting though was as I was sitting in, it wasn't triage. After they got me from triage and moved me to, I guess, the OR, or like right before I was getting ready to go to the operating room, there was a Black lady who came and she said, I'm going to be the assistant anesthesiologist. And I guess she just wanted to let me know that I was going to be okay. And I appreciated that because the surgeon was a white man. The anesthesiologist was a white man. The ER doctor was a white man. All the nurses were white that I had seen before then. I just didn't know what was about to happen. But when she came over to tell me that she would be there, and then when I got wheeled into the actual operating room, there was a male nurse and he was Black, and everybody else was Black. The only white people in there were the anesthesiologist, the head anesthesiologist, and the OB who was performing the surgery. And so that gave me some comfort, but everything went fine. I'm here. I don't, they put the mask on me, the oxygen on me, did the anesthesia. I was waking up before I realized I was falling asleep. So that went fine. And I felt okay. Like I felt more like just like frozen, I think, throughout it. I wasn't feeling much. I was just really trying to like process what was happening. And I was on guard again, trying to make sure that I came out of this alive. And I was trying to settle my husband's, and he was trying to settle me because I'm still worried about how am I going to nurse, like. But after the surgery, And then finally, I ended up having to get my baby formula. And after the surgery, I wasn't even able to breastfeed anymore. And I thought it was a reaction to the day that I was away or something. I mean, I had been pumping to try to keep the supply up. I thought, well, maybe it's just the the anesthesia or the time away or something, but it just got to the place where I couldn't even nurse anymore. And I couldn't feed my child because I just wasn't producing milk anymore. So he's formula fed now. And it worked out fine, which I'm very grateful for. I didn't think that would be the case, and that wasn't in my plan. And so that was just kind of like a devastation around it. But so after the surgery, I finally got to my room, and I think the doctor, I asked him beforehand, like, can you take pictures? Because again, when I was in one of my doula trainings, I remember one of the other women who was training with me, she had I think a partial hysterectomy or something, or had a cyst removed. And she was telling us how she was showing us pictures of her uterus. And she was saying how like the doctors had given her these pictures and it was just kind of confident in her to have them. And so that came in my mind. I thought, well, can you take pictures and give them to me? Because I wanted to see what this baby looked like where it was, and I wanted some kind of accountability I'm from Mississippi. And if anybody knows about the Mississippi appendectomy or with Fannie Lou Hamer, she went into a clinic for one thing and came out with no uterus. So I have that on my mind as I'm going in. You know what I'm saying? Like, I take some pictures and I need to see that there's still something there when y'all get done. You know what I mean? So I'm carrying all of that in there with me. But I asked the doctor to give me some pictures, and so they did. And I was able to kind of like see I'm calling it a baby. I don't know, maybe it's an embryo or something, or I know it wasn't a viable pregnancy because it was outside of the uterus and it was in my fallopian tube. But to me, it was my baby. And I got to see where he or she was. And then I found out after the surgery that they had to remove a piece of my fallopian tube. And I didn't know they were going to do that. So that's about when all of the emotions kind of started to like flood. Like, wait, like a piece of me had to be cut out. And I had worked so hard to build up my ability to give birth, and to be pregnant. And I felt like a piece of that was being taken away. And even though he was telling me, you're not infertile now, you're not, you can still get pregnant. And even though I was like, I'm done, I don't want any more kids, I've had 7, I'm fine. It's just like, I felt like I should still have that choice if I want to, And it just was not a part of, I just didn't see it being a part of my story, just after all the work I had put in and the work I had been doing, in birth work, I'm like, this is not supposed to be part of my story. But at the same time, I feel like it ties me to more women, like it broadens my scope of understanding. But that was hard. That was very hard. And I just kept feeling like, man, what did I do wrong? Like, am I not as healthy as I once was? Like, why couldn't the egg make it all the way to where it needed to be? And I felt like I failed as child. That was just really hard for a very long time. And as I was leaving the hospital, they gave me this teddy bear and this card, and they were like, we're sorry for your loss. And then it just hit me again, like, oh, this is another loss story. I don't even, I'm in the labor and delivery unit and I'm leaving with no baby. And to everybody looking at me, that's sad. You know what I mean? Like, just all of that was hitting me. Like, this is very obvious that I just experienced a loss. But But I also was tempted to go into this place of like reasoning why this happened, you know. Well, I didn't want another baby anyway. Well, I don't know. Just started thinking of all kind of stuff. But then the twist in the story was when, like weeks later, so I had the surgery in December, like the 21st, I think, or the 22nd. And then I healed for like 2 weeks. At least that was what was recommended. And you know, that was very hard. I mean, it wasn't the worst healing. It was just the healing was just kind of like reminding me of everything that I had just gone through. And I still had the pictures, and I would look back at them from time to time. And I had the teddy bear and the card, and I don't know. And then I just, like I said, and then I had to get to the place where I came back home and tried to nurse. My husband let me know in the hospital where I did have to give him some formula. We ran out of milk, and I was like, okay. He's like, well, he's taking it well. It's okay. But then when I got home, I was like, okay, I can nurse him now. But then my milk started to dwindle, and I couldn't. And just watching him get frustrated as I, you know, was trying to hop back into my routine, that was just another level of disappointment, I guess. And then, so I guess I processed that the best I could. And I think I went back to the doctor to just kind of like check to make sure everything was healing right. But also, I'm trying to see what made me take another pregnancy test. So I'm like, some weeks passed, and I had just a regular OB visit scheduled for July. But this is what I didn't get another period. So I was so I had a 2-week healing period in December. I didn't expect a cycle then. And then January, I was like, okay, well, I probably won't have a cycle here either. Then I got to February, and I didn't have a cycle, and was like, is this normal? You know, after I think it's a partial salpinectomy. I think that's how you say it. Okay. Where you get a PCF fallopian tube removed, and that's what happened. And so I was like, is this typical to not have a cycle for like 2 months after having this? And the first nurse told me, well, it could be about 6, you know, you did have a pregnancy. And so even though technically it didn't, you know, wasn't viable, whatever, it could be about 6 months after you give birth or whatever before your cycle comes back. And so I was like, okay, well, I mean, I guess that is typical. But then I was like, I don't know. My husband was like, he was laying on my stomach, and he said, it's kind of hard. Like, you should take a pregnancy test. And I was like, okay, you know, I don't know when I would have gotten pregnant, why I'd be pregnant, blah, 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 whatever. So I took it, and it was positive. And I'm like, what in the whole entire world? I'm just trying to figure out when could this have even happened? You know what I mean? Like, because I told him after all that happened, I was like, I'm not having no more kids. You're going to have to, you know, put on the thing. We can't do this no more. I don't want to go through this anymore. I'm afraid that it's going to be the same, you know, baby going to get trapped in another fallopian tube or something. And I don't want to have surgery no more. Like, I was like, I'm just not. So we didn't even do anything for a while. And then when we did, he had to use protection. Like, so I'm like, what in the world would this have happened? So I went to the doctor. They confirmed the pregnancy test. They did a urine test, and they were like, you're going to come back, and we're going to do, I think it was like some kind of blood test to determine gestation, like how far along I was. I did that. They said the blood test says you're about 7 to 9 weeks. And then I did that math and was like, well, that don't make no sense, because 7 weeks, that would have been somewhere after the surgery. And I don't really understand how that would have happened. Especially the date that I was getting to was like, I was in the middle of healing here. I know nothing happened. So that doesn't make any sense. And then when I did the 9 weeks, I was like, well, then I would have had to be pregnant when this happened. But I mean, like, very newly pregnant, which means I would have had to have gotten pregnant while I was rupturing. And I'm like, that don't really make sense either. So I came back for an ultrasound, And she was like, okay, because I don't think it's gonna, she did the vaginal one. It was like, because I think, I think we're gonna start with the vaginal because I don't see where you would have, she's thinking the same thing I'm thinking. I don't see where you would have been pregnant. This must be a new development. And I'm like, lady, I just don't know when this would have happened, but okay, let's do the vaginal, whatever. When she put the probe up there, the baby that came on the screen was huge. And I was like, what the heck? She was like, oh my God, that baby's just too big. We're gonna have to do an abdominal one. So we did, and I was about 14 weeks pregnant at the time. Right. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, how? So then I'm like, what? And we're just sitting in the office trying to figure out. So, like, when you went in surgery, you were pregnant? And I'm like, I must have been pregnant when I went through the surgery. And whenever they did the ultrasound, yes, right. And whenever they did the ultrasound for the other baby to see where it was, they couldn't see this one because there was so much blood in there. And I'm like, so I was about 4 weeks pregnant or something like that when I went in for the ectopic pregnancy.
So you were pregnant with twins.
Yes.
And they didn't. That's so odd that they didn't even catch that. They were looking because of, like you said, so much was blood internally that on the ultrasound, since it's just 2D, obviously it's not 3D, they would actually have to open you up, that obviously they wouldn't have caught what was actually in the uterus at the time.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Right. Which I wonder, like,
and you didn't actually miscarry because of them removing your fallopian tube, because that's still a lot of trauma that's happening to your uterus as they're removing that part of your fallopian tube and saving your ovary, from that atopic. Oh my gosh.
Right. And so again, I'm Googling again, like, what is this? Is it possible to be pregnant and then have an ectopic pregnancy? So then I was like, well, did I get pregnant while I was pregnant? That's kind of weird. Like, how is that possible? But then I found what's called a heterotopic pregnancy, where you're pregnant with twins. One makes it to the fraternal twins, where, two separate eggs are fertilized. One makes it to the uterus, and then the other one doesn't. And that's what happened. Is that it wasn't an ectopic, it was actually a heterotopic. So now I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, and I have to get them to change that on my chart, because nobody said that. They didn't do that thinking, like, they were just like, I don't know, and so I had to do all of this math and Googling to be like, oh, this is a whole thing in itself. So, I'm gonna do that tussle tomorrow, see what happens. But
so how far along are you?
Today I am, let's see, so the last time I went, I was 16 weeks. So okay. I should probably I'm due August 21st. So okay, I was in the whole second trimester. So I'm probably about 18 20 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'll get another update tomorrow. And I was just like, there's a baby in there during surgery, and is everything okay? And like, so that's why my milk shut off, because I was pregnant.
Completely shut off.
Right.
Because you were expecting. And that makes so much sense on how your body responded after the surgery, because you probably had minimal bleeding too after the surgery, which is not normal, after you have a major abdominal surgery like that.
Yeah.
So it was because you were still pregnant and your body was protecting the baby. God, oh my God, how amazing are our bodies.
I know. I just
and God protecting that other baby. Like, oh my goodness.
Yes, because I feel like if they had seen that baby in there, that they wouldn't have taken the ectopic pregnancy seriously.
They would have still taken that ectopic pregnancy because you were bleeding internally. They're going to save you regardless. That still was going to happen. I think what would have happened, they would have probably, all the precautions that they would have taken around that would have been different for you. I think they probably would have given you different medication. Like, I think they would have done a bunch of things differently, especially knowing that there was another baby in there. So yes, definitely you got to go tell them to update your chart and do all the things as you continue on through this pregnancy. So I would love for you to share, because I feel like, through your lost stories, through your successful birth experiences, there's a lot of healing that's taking place. So I would love for you to talk about just your healing journey as you've gone through this, because it's been a lot of births, a lot of losses, and then obviously this part of your story is even more traumatic when you think about it. Like, you know, going through this atopic pregnancy in general is probably the more severe, and it's more life threatening compared to a lot of the other losses that we have. Like, because if you don't get that removed, you literally can bleed internally and pass away.
Mhm.
So thank God that you caught that you listened to your body, that you really understood, you know, I need to get this taken care of. And the providers responded the way they did with the sense of urgency because of that. But, you know, now you have this miracle you're carrying. So I would love for you to just talk about the healing throughout this literally last 10 years that you've been on this journey to motherhood, especially birthing babies that you still have, and then obviously through the losses.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for putting that into that perspective, because that does tie a lot of things together. You know, you just kind of like move through things and you survive them and you celebrate where you can. And I think it is probably why I've had so many babies. You know what I mean? Some people are like, y'all still having babies? But, you know, it took so much for me to get here. And I feel like I learned with every pregnancy and and it just, it doesn't feel complete to me yet. You know what I mean? But the crazy thing is, people who don't know your story, or people who do and just refuse to get it and to put these things into perspective, ask the most rude questions and say the most rude things and call you stuff like a baby factory, or is this the last one now? Or you having another baby? You had all these babies, and it's just like, how you doing with all them kids? And it's just like, okay, I set a goal and I'm reaching it. So I would like to feel proud of that. You know what I mean? But just combating that so much. And this last pregnancy that I had, I got into this really heated argument with this lady who just started, I made some Facebook post, and then she started coming at me and calling me a baby factory or whatever. But it was so healing to argue her down. Like, I'm not going to leave this conversation feeling diminished, like I have so many times when people have tried to make me feel bad about having all these kids or so many kids or whatever. And I just kept arguing my point until I won the debate. And it turned out that this same lady had, and I didn't even remember having this conversation with her, but she had gone into my inbox and asked for help overcoming fertility. And I'm like, why would you, of all people, I didn't even remember that, because there was a point where people would just come ask me questions and I would just answer them. So I didn't even remember her in particular. And then I was going to inbox her and saw that and was like, how dare you ask for my help to accomplish the very thing that you're now trying to ridicule me for? And so after having that conversation with that lady, I feel like I overcame something. And then I went into labor the next day, which was my due date. I went straight into labor on my due date. And it was a way that I've never gone into labor before. Like, typically I'll lose my mucus plug, and then some bloody show will happen. But it was just, I woke up, I had like 3 strong contractions and my water broke and labor just began. And I was like, oh my gosh. But I think I had released something, in combating this idea that I was messing my life up by having children that I prayed for. You know what I mean? So there's been a lot of healing in people's perceptions of what I'm doing, as opposed to what I'm doing internally, for my own self and building a family that I always saw myself having. Yeah. And then this baby, I said, I don't want any more babies, blah, blah, blah. And I have 7 boys, and this one's a girl. And yeah, I haven't told anybody that. So this is the first, place I've said that, except my husband. And this one's a girl. And it's just like, I don't know. Whatever I thought I would feel about getting pregnant again, because I said I didn't want another baby. And then the devastation of getting pregnant and then feeling like my choice might be taken away from me now, and I can't anymore. And then realizing oh, you've been pregnant all this time. And then when I saw her pop across the ultrasound screen, she just seemed so healthy and so vibrant, and she was moving and kicking, and I just couldn't feel anything but absolute bliss and joy. typically sometimes when I'm pregnant, it's like, do I want another baby? Is this too many? Is it the right time? This is really close to the next one. But like this time, it was just nothing but, it was immediately joy, because I didn't expect this news at all. I thought, you know what I mean? And then it was sadness because, oh wait, she's supposed to have a twin. And like, but then I was like, all my life I've been like, I don't want twins because that's a lot. So, and then I also feel like my whole journey through, part of why I started Genesis Birthing and Living was to create a community for myself. I didn't have one, and I didn't have a place where I feel like I could talk about birth in a way that was celebrated and excited, and where we like explore and discover what we're doing here, talk about the importance of it, and swap tips and stories, and just, you know, do what in my mind women like sitting on a porch would do when they talk about the things they go through in life. And this is just a really big thing that women go through and that we experience. And it just felt like such a robbery to me, and such a void to be approaching it and not have anywhere to explore it. You know what I mean? Like, as if all these women above me hadn't done this. Like, how did I get here? You know what I mean? Somebody, I got cousins and y'all was doing this. Like, why doesn't anybody want to talk about it? And then I had peers, because of where I was in Mississippi, who we don't have a lot of options for like how you give birth. And so I'm wanting to home birth and, you know, do all of this. And I didn't really have a community of other people that I could share that with. You know, they were like, you crazy, why you want to birth at home? You know, so it's just been a way to take my time and walk through what I'm doing and what I'm going through, and share my story with other women who want to share their story, and then listen to other women's stories. Because I also did a Listen to Black Women like web series where I would just ask about, tell me your birth story, you know, and then we just talk about our birth stories, and they talk about the decisions that they wanted to make around their stories. And with the narrative of the Black maternal health crisis, I feel like our voices are so often left out. You know, everybody's talking about us, around us, trying to figure out what the Negro problem, you know what I mean, for like Black women. What are we gonna do with the Black women and their bodies? And so many times our own opinions and our own desires and thoughts and stories are just left out of it. And it's just been a way to amplify my own voice, but also to amplify the voices of the women. And then we just kind of validate each other with our desires, and we're not doing too much because we're thinking about this. You know what I mean? And it returns a sense of power to you when all the narrative around you is doom and destruction and the taking of autonomy. You know what I mean? It just gives you a space. It's giving me a space to feel like I have something to return to. When I start to worry about how things are going to go, I have something to return to. Like, okay, you've done this before. There is a whole community of women who support you and who, you know, are doing this too. And just try to focus on that, I guess.
I love that. So I would love to leave our listeners some encouraging words as people navigate their own journey. I think, you know, we are in March of this year, so we're rounding out this first quarter, and a lot of people are still wanting to get pregnant this year and have babies this year. You know, it's still a goal on some people's lists to accomplish. So I would love for you to just leave encouraging words for those listeners who are still on the journey to become mothers, you know, trying to conceive, doing all the fertility things to make sure that they're not only feeding their bodies to make sure that their bodies are healthy and well, but also feeding their minds and their souls. So when that baby does come, that they're prepared for it. You know, they're mentally prepared for what that looks like, And now that you are like halfway through this pregnancy, like, sis, I know that you can leave us some encouraging words, because that's essentially you speaking to yourself.
Yes. Yes, I have had to battle a lot of, fear and doubt and all of that. And I would just say, try your best to live in the moment and celebrate the small wins, whatever they are. Because it varies from person to person. Stories are different, situations are different, but just be gentle with yourself, be patient with yourself, give yourself space and grace, and take it moment, day at a time. And if you find some joy in something, just sit in it, and don't try to, don't worry too much about the next moment. If there's nothing you can do about it, like if you can find joy in a moment, if you're sad in a moment, I've learned, just sit there and it's okay. Your feelings are valid wherever you are. But we say that so many times with our sad feelings, but your happy feelings are valid too. And sometimes when you're trying to juggle joy and grief, you can feel guilty feeling joy. You know what I mean? So all of your feelings are valid, the good ones and the bad ones. And I would just say, honor them, acknowledge them, explore them, take as much time as you need with whatever those feelings are, and just give yourself grace.
I love it. Give yourself grace. So we are going to continue to keep you lifted in our prayers and our thoughts as you navigate the rest of this pregnancy. And I would love for you to let us know where we can connect with you after this, your business, and any other details you want to leave us.
So I am Genesis Birthing and Living. I'm Shayla Brown. The platform is Genesis Birthing and Living across all platforms. I think on Twitter it's Birth Blog, or X it's Birth Blog. I'm also in the process of forming a doula training. I get a lot of questions about how to birth outside of the system. I've had most of my births have been at home, either with a midwife or unassisted. So I'm in the process of developing a doula training to not just for people who want to be doulas, but also for moms, because I think it's important for moms to train as doulas. I know that's what helped me a lot, is having a doula training and certification under my belt before I was my first client, honestly. So as much information as we can get as women in this country, I think the better. And I think, like I said, from the framework of a doula, I just think that's because a lot of places we go, you can't even have a doula. So if you have to, as much as you can know, this just helps. It helps with your confidence. It helps with your outcomes. But I also, like I said, particularly birthing outside the system with a midwife, unassisted, however you want to do that. And it's Genesis Birthing and Living. I also have a YouTube channel where I share Black women's stories, listening to Black women, but I also shared a lot about my own journey in the Birthing with the Browns iteration of things. So I'll be doing more of that, and that's where you can find me.
I love it. Thank you so much, Shayla, for coming on and sharing your story with us. I know people are going to definitely relate to you. And then also, I'm going to make sure I leave all her links, you all, so you all can go see her series on YouTube as well. But thank you again. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was really healing. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com to stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter. Please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.